Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. And welcome back to Happy Haley Days. We're on another day of December, counting down to Christmas, a new video every single day. Today's video is going to be a top 12 rec video, but it's a little bit different because we're not going to be recommending books. I'm going to be going into the stats, which you know I love a good statistic. I'm going to tell you my top 12 most read authors. These are not necessarily going to be my favorite authors, but I think it's really interesting to see like whose books do I actually reach for the most of all the authors on my shelves. And honestly, quite a few of these really surprised me. Like honestly, my top couple authors, I was like, who is she? What is going on? My favorite authors are definitely in here, but quite a few of my favorite authors have only written a few books, so they don't have the backlist and the volume to make it onto this list. Like obviously we know I love Grady Hendrix, I love Rachel Harrison, I love Craig DeLuey, I love Nat Cassidy, I love Rebecca Searle, I love Margarita Montemore. Like those are some of my favorite authors, but they're not my most read. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into my top 12 most read from authors. I'm going to start at my number 12 and we will work our way up to the author that I have read the most books from. At this point in the video, I want you to comment down below who you think my top author is going to be. Karen Slaughter, Lisa Jewell, what do you think? Who do you think is going to be my top author that I've read the most from? I'm really excited to see you guys' predictions. I would have never in a million years predicted who it is, but let's go ahead and get into it. Starting out at number 12, we have Eric LaRocca, and they are coincidentally one of my favorite authors. I read almost every single thing they write. We have a little professional relationship across the internet, which is really cool. Eric sends me their new releases, which I really appreciate. I love getting to read them before they're actually out, so I can give you guys the full tea and recommend them before they're actually available. I've loved pretty much everything that I've read from Eric. I would say my most favorite of their backlist is They Were Here Before Us, The Trees Grew Because I Bled There, You've Lost a Lot of Blood, and the new one, At Dark I Become Loathsome, which comes out in 2025 next month. I would say my least favorite is Everything the Darkness Eats, but I still gave that 3 stars. Like it wasn't a bad book, it just didn't connect for me like their others did. I love their brand of like weird, trippy, conceptual, meaningful horror. There's always a good metaphor in there. They always take you on a ride and you feel like you're tripping through space and time. I love the gruesomeness and the darkness. Really just everything about Eric LaRocca's writing is right up my alley. So absolutely love, will continue to read from them, and makes sense that they're on this list. Number 11 is Riley Sager, which I was surprised that Riley Sager had written enough to be on this list. I don't know if I mentioned with Eric LaRocca, I've read 8 of their books and that's all of them. That's how they got to number 12. Riley Sager, I've read all 8 of his books as well, which is how he got to number 11. I guess they're technically tied, but I was surprised to know that Riley Sager has 8 books. I didn't think it was that many. I don't know, for some reason it's like 4 books, but I guess it's because he had 4 books out when I started BookTube. I don't know, but I love Riley Sager. I have not read a thriller from Riley Sager that I hadn't liked, even though quite a few of his books are controversial. People have different opinions on them. For me, every single one has been hit out of the park. I love all of his books. My very favorites are The House Across the Lake and Survive the Night. Those are my top 2. Those are probably the 2 most controversial ones with the weirdest, wackiest, out of left field twists, but I'm obsessed with them. Riley Sager, keep being unhinged, and I'm gonna keep reaching for your books. In my number 10 spot, we have A.R. Torre, and I have read 9 of her books. I actually just need to read 1 more and I will have finished finished her entire backlist. I cannot wait to film an A.R. Torre guide for you guys. I think that will be coming at some point during the course of Happy Hailey Days, hopefully, if I can finish the Ghostwriter. That's literally her debut book. The Ghostwriter is the only one that I have left to read, and she's pretty hit or miss for me. I have had a few 1 stars. I really did not like A Familiar Stranger. That one I just thought was really bad. I'm not even gonna lie, I could barely get through it. But she's also written some of my favorite thrillers of all time. The Girl in 6E was phenomenal, and I also recently read her new release, The Last Party, which was 5 stars and hooked me in the entire time. It was so good. She writes thrillers with kind of unlikable female main characters that are dark and don't always make the most morally right decisions. She loves a morally gray female lead, and I love that, but sometimes the execution isn't exactly where I want it to be. There have been a few times where I've predicted twists or just the twists have felt dumb to me, but overall I really like her thrillers. I like that they're all available on KU, really accessible, and I didn't expect her to be on this list, but it kind of makes sense now that I'm talking about it. In spot number 9, we have Agatha Christie. I've read 10 Agatha Christie books. I went through a huge Agatha Christie phase, like 2017, 2018 when I was in college. There was some like fall winter time when I was just really comforted and obsessed with Agatha Christie books. I wanted to like do my mystery thriller education, I guess, and get all of the relevant source material. So I read 10 Agatha Christie books, and I really liked most of them, although none of them are like 5-star all-time favorites. I gave most of them like between 2.5 and 4 stars. They're older, they're a little bit average as a reading experience, but they all have this very predictable formulaic atmosphere with an unpredictable, not so formulaic outcome, and I really appreciated that. My favorite type of Agatha Christie book is the Hercule Poirot series. I recommend all of them really, but I loved the murder of Roger Ackroyd specifically. I really like the ABC murders, and of course Murder on the Orient Express is iconic. Next up we have, y'all are gonna die, Natasha Preston. Oh, Natasha Preston, no! Of all the authors that I've dragged across the internet, I feel like Natasha Preston has gotten the worst of it. I really do not like her books often, but god damn it if I can't stop picking them up. She has some really engrossing synopses. I'm not gonna lie, she always sucks me in with what is blurbed on the back cover. Natasha Preston started on Wattpad, if you can believe it. That's where I read her first book, which is The Cellar. It was a kidnapping thriller. She writes YA thrillers pretty regularly, like 1 or 2 a year at this point, and I always pick them up because the synopses always sound amazing. But she does this thing where she leaves us on a cliffhanger instead of delivering a twist, and it drives me batty. Sometimes the writing style is also like really stilted and weird. I don't know. Most of her books I've given 2 stars or less, but there are a few standouts that are 4 stars, and I just keep chasing them. I will never stop picking up her books. I literally have to read her new releases, and I'm pretty sure I do read her new release every single year, which I can't even say that about some of my favorite authors. Why am I so loyal to her? I don't know, but she's one of my most read authors of all time. And coming in with 11 books read, I have R.L. Stine. Now, if we're being real, I've probably read all of R.L. Stine's books, but I'm really only counting what I've read in adulthood. Like if we're counting childhood books, then whoever wrote Junie B. Jones would be my top most read author. I read all the Junie B. Jones books. R.L. Stine, I've probably read all of his books as well, but as an adult, I've read 11 of his books, mainly Fear Street, maybe a couple of Goosebumps thrown in there. Y'all know I collect vintage Fear Street books. I have quite a few first edition, first printings of Fear Street, and I just think they're so nostalgic and fun because that was really some of my first exposure to horror as a child, and I loved it so much. It just feels like it is inner child healing, okay? It's just a good moment when I get to take an afternoon and read a Fear Street book. So as an adult, I've read 11 books by R.L. Stine, and I've really liked every single one. I would say my favorites are the Silent Night books. I really love those Fear Street books. I liked, let me see, I liked the Wrong Number books. I really liked those. I liked The First Scream. I like The New Year's Party. Those are some of my favorites. If you're wanting to read an R.L. Stine book for the nostalgia, I would start there. Halfway through the list here, in spot number 6, we have Megan Miranda. And I have read 11 of her books. What the hell? I don't know. I don't think of Megan Miranda when I think of like authors that I read most often, but I guess I have read her entire backlist. So yeah, I read 11 of her books. Most of them are not all-time favorites. I've only given 2 of her books 5 stars. That is The Perfect Stranger and The Last House Guest. I loved those 2 thrillers, but most of her thrillers I've given like 2 or 3 stars. Honestly, they don't usually hit for me. The Last to Vanish I thought was horrible. It was trash. I hated it. I usually did not enjoy her YA books, but I keep picking her up. So you know what? I don't know what to tell you. And now we are getting into my top 5 most read authors. In spot number 5, we have Lisa Jewell. What? I thought she was gonna be my top author. I literally thought she was gonna be my top author. Lisa Jewell is one of the reasons why I started my booktube channel, okay? Because I started voraciously reading her entire backlist and wanting to talk about her books to someone, and I was like, I just have to talk to a camera, okay? Because nobody else in my life has read all this woman's books. Lisa Jewell writes UK-based thrillers that are usually really character-driven, have some fucked up family dynamic in it, and it's not the biggest twist of all time, but there's so much tension and suspense in the character arcs that you want to keep flipping pages and reading just to see where everyone ends up. I hate when people say that the twists in Lisa Jewell books are not shocking, because that is not usually the point. It's more about the arc and the character development than the shock and surprise. I don't think a Lisa Jewell book would feel right if it had a twist that was from out of left field, like maybe a Riley Sager book would do. I just think she writes very intentionally about her characters. They're always very morally gray and hard to empathize with, but somehow she makes you do it. I just think she's so incredible. So many of my favorite thrillers are written by her. I've given her so many 5 stars at this point. I really need to do an updated Lisa Jewell ranking video, and I plan on filming that soon. In spot number 4 for my most read authors, I have Colleen Hoover. Oh, womp womp. I know, you guys. I know. I was a victim of the pandemic Colleen Hoover craze, and I'm happy to say that I wasn't an obsessed over-the-top fan that just ate up everything she ever read. I was pretty critical from the very beginning of reading Colleen Hoover books, which I feel like has saved me a lot of embarrassment. I have a pretty nuanced view on Colleen Hoover. I think her decisions as a business person and as a person on social media having a public platform are really stupid. I don't agree with a lot of her decisions or things that she says, statements that she's made. As far as her work, I would say half of it is horrible, atrocious trash. When I think of trash, things that come to mind are Ugly Love. I fucking hated that book. Confess, that's one of the worst books I've ever read. I just viscerally hated those books. And those were some of the first few books that I read from her. But there are also things like All Your Perfects and It Ends With Us that kept me reading Colleen Hoover's releases. I've since stopped really keeping up with her books because, number one, it's not as in demand on the internet, and I feel like it invites a lot of criticism, which I don't like fielding that in the comments, but also because they just don't interest me as much now that I know kind of the lens from which they are coming from. But if you're interested in a few of my favorite Colleen Hoover books, like I said, All Your Perfects, It Ends With Us, and Reminders of Him, those are all 5 stars for me, and I love them. Do I think that It Ends With Us should be marketed as a romance novel? No, I think it should be rife with trigger warnings and be a drama about abuse, and it does capture abuse very, very well in my personal opinion, with my personal experience and my professional experience as well, working with victims of DV and survivors of abusive relationships. So that's just my take, but yeah, I was very surprised to see that she's actually in my most read authors. Maybe just because her books are so quick and easy to read. I don't know, but I've read a dozen of them. I feel like maybe I deserve some financial compensation for all the time that I spent reading a dozen Colleen Hoover books. I don't know. And in my top 3 spot, we have Karen Slaughter. Not a surprise, honestly. I expected her to be in my top 3. I thought maybe she would be number 1, but no, she's number 3. I've read 13 of Karen Slaughter's books. She is notoriously one of my favorite authors. She wrote my favorite book of all time, which is Pretty Girls. That's the namesake of my book club. I literally have a tattoo of this locket from the cover of the book. Like, I am obsessed with Pretty Girls. I absolutely loved her entire Grant County series. Those were all 4 and 5 star books. All of her standalones have been amazing. The only one that I really haven't enjoyed as much as the others is Pieces of Her, and I still gave it 3.5 stars. So it's not like it's a bad book. I love Karen Slaughter's writing. She goes from this very classic, almost nostalgic feeling Southern mystery perspective. It almost feels noir at some points. It's very gritty, it's very dark, it's very, very intense violence, and she has some shocking reveals. Oh my god. Some of her books, I just want to throw them across the room, partly because of the violence and partly because of how shocking she makes things. The emotions are also dialed up to a 10. She does not just abandon her characters to shock you. She really develops them with intention, and I always appreciate that. 13 books down, quite a few to go. She has a very extensive backlist, but I'm going to dip my toes into the Will Trent series at some point soon. In my number 2 spot, most read authors of all time, Sarah J. Maas. What the fuck? I read my first Sarah J. Maas book last year. Or no, when did I read A Court of Thorns and Roses? It definitely wasn't last year. There was a long gap between me reading the first ACOTAR book and the second, third, fourth, fifth. Throne of Glass. Those are the other ones that I've read from her. And Assassin's Blade. Okay, yeah, so this makes sense. I've only read 2 of her series, but I've read 14 of her books. I feel like it's just easy with fantasy to read a ton from one author, whereas with all the other books that I read, thriller and horror, I don't really do that. I would rather like dance around and explore new authors and new things, or like read within a certain trope of a bunch of thrillers or a bunch of horror books that have like a certain thing that I like, but I don't often read series. So Sarah J. Maas is the one person that I've read series from, like I said, ACOTAR and Throne of Glass, which I really, really liked both of those, but neither as much as I enjoyed Fourth Wing and as much as I am currently enjoying Serpent in the Wings of Night, but y'all don't know about that yet, so that's just a little teaser for you. Do I think she's phenomenal and amazing and the best author ever? No, she's not even close to one of my favorite authors, but I've read those 2 series, so I've read quite a few from her. That's why she's on this list. Honestly, it was quite a surprise to me because I don't count myself as an SJM stan, but here we are. And my number 1 top most read from author. This literally blew my mind, you guys. I just made a video about her. I would be so surprised if any of y'all got this right in the comments. Hopefully one of y'all did. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna have to give you a prize or something. You want me to send you some ARCs? You know what? If anyone accurately guessed this author being my top most read author, I'm gonna send you an ARC. Put your Instagram in the comments if you did, and I'm gonna DM you and I'll send you some ARCs that I have, because my top author is, drum roll please, Lucinda Berry. I literally just made my backlist ranking and rating video on Lucinda Berry, where I went through every single one of her psychological thrillers and gave you the full tea. If you missed that video, it was earlier in Happy Hailey Days. I will link it up above and down below so you can check it out. I have read 15 of her books, which is all of them, and they're kind of hit or miss. Mostly hits though, mostly 4 stars and above. I really, really love Saving Noah. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Also The Perfect Child, and one of our own, really, really, really great. Keep Your Friends Close was incredible. I just really love Lucinda Berry, but I was kind of surprised to see her in my top spot. She's just not who I immediately think of when I think of my favorite authors that I reach for all the time. But with that, those are gonna be all of my top most read from authors. Were you surprised? Who are your top authors? Let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys are enjoying Happy Hailey Days. Don't forget to give this video a like if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to go to therapy and read a book this week, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!